Good morning. We'll be getting underway in just a minute here. And while we are preparing, if there's anyone who has logged in online, we have set up a chat function. So those online, if you have questions or comments, feel free to use the chat function. Pastor Greg will be monitoring that, and we'll pass that along to us here. All right, thank you. Good morning, and I think we're ready to begin. So let's open with prayer, please. Our Father and our God, we thank you for bringing us here today, not just physically, but spiritually as well, and for the time that you've brought us through over the last 18 months. This has been about growth. This has been about surrendering to your will. This is about learning through trial. We thank you to teach us that speaking and listening was not just a concept, but something that we needed to adopt so that we could work together as a congregation. We thank you for teaching us that prayerful deliverance is not just a concept, but it is real, and it applies to big issues, but in many small ways throughout our lives. We thank you for teaching us that prayer is not just for safety and comfort and health here on this planet, but also about battling for the lives and souls of ourselves and for those that we come in contact with, so that we may spend our eternity with you. And so, Lord, be with us during this meeting today. Give us your guidance that we may conduct our business in accordance with your will. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Good morning and welcome. You have the full set of written reports. Those were emailed out to you previously, and I think there were a couple extras out in the lobby area at the Visitor Center. I hope you had an opportunity with the advance email to take a look through and to see the reports from the officers and the boards. And so, as we typically do, I will offer officers and board members, board chairs, if you have anything that you want to add to your written report or call out from your written report. Anyone? Okay. Then based on the written reports that you have been through as members of the congregation, does anyone have any questions or comments about any of those reports? And I will be saying a couple things in particular, though, about the financial report here in a minute, and we'll invite David as well. But on any of the other reports? Okay, very good. The one thing that I do want to call out from the financial report is on the first page of that report, I want you to observe that David took a good bit of time to restructure how our financials are presented, and that is so that it would be consistent with the fund's structure and administration protocols that we adopted at a prior meeting. So if you look at the unrestricted funds, you see that a number of funds that we were carrying previously are now shown at zero, and instead there are 4 funds shown: general fund, improvements and maintenance, Memorial Ministry and Mission, and Operating Reserve. And so that's consistent with that policy that we adopted. You also see just below that restricted that most of those funds remain as they have been, and that is also consistent with the new policy. The only one that is zeroed out is the 2020 fund, and those monies have been transferred up into those prior unrestricted funds that I mentioned previously. So does anybody have any questions or comments on that, or David, anything that I missed on that point? Okay. Other than that, you'll see that we are in remarkably sound financial condition. We thank all of you for your help on both sides of the ledger, both for your giving and then also for all of those who are involved in the church ministry for their faithful stewardship of the funds consistent with the budget. Okay. Let's proceed now to unfinished business. And yes, oh, I'm sorry, Kath.
Does this change to the funds mean that if you designate an offering, it just goes into one of the 4 funds no matter what you designate?
All right. So what we have asked in the policy is that anyone who wants to donate will do so faithfully and just indicate, is this for missions, is this for improvement and maintenance, or one of the existing funds. That doesn't mean, though, that for extraordinary circumstances that you can't make a very specific designation. But the reason that we headed in that direction is what we find is that people will make smaller donations for one particular thing, one particular item, or they'll call it something, and then it just sits there year over year over year, and we really don't know how to properly apply it toward the mission of the church. And so that's why our hope is that we'll direct funds or legacies toward one of these 4 designated areas. Okay, and that also, I'll also add that there will still occasionally be special offerings for particular things. That's not quite the same as you're talking about a designated gift, but rather there will be some things that come up from time to time that are outside of those 4 funds that we'll be requesting special offerings for. Okay. And, good question. Any others? Okay, thank you. All right, then we will proceed to unfinished business, and you see that Believe, Belong, Bridge, and Become is still unfinished. Of course, that always will be, because until the Day of Atonement and Resurrection, that's what we're about. There are some differences, though, in the report this time. For the last several quarters, it's been about how are we transitioning through COVID and out of COVID, and now we're pleased to say that we're largely past it. We can't say we're fully past it because that's still a part of our reality in many ways, but we have now been able to resume much of the normal active life of the church. But I think what's important to include in our report today is that it isn't really the same normal that we've been through. And I don't mean that socially, but rather I mean that in terms of our church's ministry. So what you see as you take a look through each of our board reports is that we've resumed many of the things that we've traditionally done. You know, we had the youth the science camp, we had the youth mission. We're gathering in the same room for worship and many things like that. But they're also taking on a little bit of a different flavor. And so we're continuing Zoom and streaming, for example, because we've learned that that's a way that we can provide additional outreach to those who are not yet members of the church, but also members of the church who can't be here on a particular day. There's also new things that we're working on. Mission Possible, I think it's just a wonderful example of that, and a new way that we can reach out to the community and show who we are as a church and what our place is, and show that we're God's people, and try to use that as a means to bring people in. We have a new Sunday school class coming up that's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the Word of the Lord, the Bible and how we understand it and how we can draw more from it. And that's going to augment some of our traditional Sunday school efforts. We've changed and expanded our prayer ministry in a lot of different ways, and that the rather unique experience we did the other week with prayer as a part of the service and following the service in addition to our other prayer ministries. So there are so many different ways. We're delighted to see the return of the picnic. We're delighted to see the return almost of Coffee Cafe. And so there are things that have helped us grow as a church and give us even greater opportunities as we proceed along that spectrum of believe, belong, bridge, become. You know, we're all believers here, and that's the easy part. Belonging, sitting in the sanctuary together and worshiping together is an important part of that belief. The next two are a little bit harder and require more effort on our parts. Bridging, we've been doing some wonderful, wonderful work there with all the community-related ministries that you've seen, and it's just some wonderful, wonderful work. Becoming a disciple is the next, and for many of us, a little bit harder step. And I'll confess that I'm part of that group, that it's easy for me to get out and help as a volunteer to go work at the food bank, but it's just a little bit harder for me to look someone in the eye and say, are you a believer, and are you able to come to our church? And so we're finding ways to help you engage in that part of ministry and grow in that way in His Word. So with that in mind, we will remind you that there are plenty of opportunities to volunteer. This is the formal color version of all of our boards, but that's just one way. There are many, many other ways that are of a more permanent nature, teaching, for example, or just one-off times. So participating in the Mission Possible is a great example there. But each of those gives you an opportunity to participate. So, and I will just conclude that little promo by saying that our Coffee Cafe folks would welcome some more volunteers. And by the way, Coffee Cafe volunteers are not limited to the women. We are going to very specifically invite the gentlemen to participate as well, because y'all know you like the coffee, and so you ought to be part of both serving and cleaning up afterwards. And that's just one example of how you can take those small steps toward expanding your ministry. So, pastors, board chairs, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Just something to make sure that you're clear and aware of. The day after Mission Possible is going to be our celebration event, and that is for everyone. That is open to the entire church. Whether you are unable to participate in our Mission Possible or not, we want you to come celebrate with us the things that we were able to do and to gather together and just be part of that bigger celebration. So that's open to all, whether you can actually give your time on Saturday or not.
Others?
I just have a question about the picnic. Are we going to be bringing food, or how's that working?
Very good question. Yes. Next week in the bulletin, there will be sign-up directions and information about that. The mission board is meeting this week. We're going to finalize those details, and you will have that information in plenty of time before the picnic. So, thank
you. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. All right, let's now proceed to new business. And first up is capital expense authorization for roof replacement. So to set the stage for you, I don't know if we got that tile replaced back here, but if anyone was in the ladies' room, okay. So you'll see a couple stained tiles, and what that means is the roof above is leaking. This is something that we've been aware of. We've been doing some patching over time. We had planned, as you will recall, to replace at least part of the roof this year. Thank you, Mr. COVID. The contractors are really, really busy, and so it's been difficult to get folks out to at least even give us estimates, let alone lock in on when a replacement might take place. But I do want to thank Tom Kennerly in particular and the trustees. They've been diligent with that, and so now we do have a good contractor and a good estimate that is along the lines of the budget that we had originally anticipated to do a replacement of the roof. Originally, we had talked about replacing the 3 sections over a period of time, and by the way, I'm talking about the flat rubber roofs over each section of the church here, not the slate. But what became apparent to us is that because a contractor has to mobilize, and that means bringing out all the equipment, bringing the cranes, all the other things, plus then you have potentially 3 different contractors and 3 different warranties, it made more sense to simply do all 3 at the same time. And so that's the proposal that the trustees sought. The bid came in at just a little bit over $82,000 to do all 3. And the trustees believe that that is a fair estimate, and it is a contractor we've used before who does good work and does a fair job in doing estimates, and so we think it's a pretty good number. As you may know from your own homes, a lot of times though when you begin to take things off you find other issues underneath, and so there is a clause in there that if there is something else underneath there, we might have to have a discussion about some additional expense. But by and large, we think that the $82,000 number is good. Now, the reason it's coming in front of you today is that we adopted the new policy on fund structure and administration, and we set up the separate improvement and maintenance fund. And under those rules, the trustees in any year can spend up to $25,000 on any individual project without congregational approval. This, of course, at $82,000 and change, is above that amount, and so that does need to come back to the congregation for approval. And so what we are going to be looking for is a motion to allow an expenditure of $82,000 from the Improvements and Maintenance Fund for that purpose. Before we take the motion, I'll see if CJ has anything or Tom has anything that they would like to add or correct from my comments. And to add to that point, the same contractor will be coming out and doing some interim repairs so that these couple leaks that popped up in last week's rainstorm get addressed before the full replacement. We had initially planned to do some photos. We didn't think that would be necessary because the ceiling is a much better graphic for all of you. But for the record, the front section of the roof has somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 patches to it already, and so it does very much need replaced. So with that in mind, would someone like to make a motion to authorize the expenditure of $82,000? Thank you. We have a motion. Steve? And do we have a second? Okay, second, Greg. Okay, is there discussion on the motion? Bruce? Oh, Kath was, yeah, okay.
I know it's not directly related to this, but we have a flat roof. Are we planning to rebuild another flat roof because we will just be having this problem again?
So, flat roofs can be done properly, and these were done properly initially. The simple fact is they've just aged. And so, like any sloped roof or three-tab shingle roof, it has an estimated life expectancy, and that's what we're dealing with here. And so to change the roof, I think, would probably be an engineering issue as well as a much more significant cost, but these can be done soundly. Okay.
Just kind of a question and then a minor comment. But does the roof replacement also include this slate, the original? It doesn't. Okay. But we will have cranes on hand. So I'm looking at our logo there, and there's a cross on top of the peak. And I looked outside, and there's a weather vane really up on top of the peak. And I just wondered if, while cranes are here, we could consider, and I don't know what the original thinking was, maybe a weather vane, maybe the church is supposed to point you in the right direction. I didn't think that deeply about it, but maybe, that we're into outreach now, maybe across, if we could switch that out, part of this contract, might be a suggestion.
Thank you. I think that's a fair comment. The type of crane that we're bringing in, though, isn't that kind of crane. It's more for lifting goods and then also for lifting up the HVAC systems so that the roof can be placed underneath. It's not one, there's an operator up at the top who can reach out and do that. I think that's something that the trustees can take up at another time as we do the normal maintenance on the slate, because the slate repair folks are the ones that would be getting up that high, and particularly on the slate on the steeple, and so they might be in a position to do a replacement at the top. CJ, is that okay? Anyone else? Okay, then, on the motion to authorize $82,000 expenditure from the Improvements and Maintenance Fund, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries unanimously. I also do want to, before we leave that agenda item, highlight something out of CJ's report. We have arranged with a contractor to do handicap assist touchpads for the 2 restroom doors out here. We're working through a little bit of a permitting and design issue with the Borough of Camp Hill, but we think that project's on track, and that one comes in significantly under the limit, so it's not for you for action today, but we thought you'd be interested in knowing. Okay. All right. Then we have a matter of elections, and as required in our bylaws, to add anyone to any of our boards requires a vote by the congregation. New member, Joe Scasco, has indicated an interest in serving on the Board of Missions, and so his name is in front of you today to serve in that capacity. Can I have a motion to accept him on the board? Motion, second? Okay. Got that, Gail? Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, and that brings us to other business. Is there any other matter anyone would like to raise today? All right, seeing none, then we come to adjournment, and Pastor Kelly, would you give us benediction, please? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.